Hello and welcome to Kind 203 Human Nutrition. I am very excited for this semester or half semester or whatever it is that you want to call it. We have a lot to cover in a short amount of time. And with that, understand that this first week is probably going to cover more material than all the other weeks after this. So there's a lot for this first week, but things are going to calm down after week one. The first set of slides will just serve as an introduction that hopefully is going to provide you with an understanding of the philosophy of this class and an overview of some of the main topics that we're going to cover. It's all an introduction, so you don't have to study anything on this set of slides in too great of detail. So sit back, relax, pay attention to class policies, and we'll get going with some more in-depth things in the PowerPoints and videos that follow this one.
Before we go anywhere with this class, we have to understand two things that are related to nutrition. Number one, what is the problem that occurs if nutrition is not addressed for an individual? And two, what are the benefits of nutrition for any person? To understand the full scope of the problem, let's take a look at the life trajectory of two individuals, two people that I know on a personal basis. They are both elder men that have lived long and fulfilling lives. Both are men that I have looked up to, and both men have had a very strong and beneficial impact on my life. Both were diagnosed with diabetes in their mid-40s or mid-50s. Diabetes is a challenging diagnosis, and it's not something to be taken lightly. It requires a drastic lifestyle change that centers around daily careful diet and medication management. Now, man number one was frustrated when he learned of his diagnosis, but he was determined to take control of his health. He learned how to eat properly to manage diabetes. He started having regular, balanced meals 3 times a day with plenty of vegetables and healthy sources of protein. And because he wanted to enjoy his life, he made sure that he knew how to make his food taste good. On top of that, he started exercising regularly. After work every day, he would walk or bike 30 minutes to an hour. These habits were difficult to incorporate into his routine, but after a month or two, these activities became second nature to him. He was able to return to continue living his regular life while doing all of the things that he wanted to do with his family. As years passed and as he grew older, he continued to vacation with his family, and into his 80s, he was still able to hike in the mountains and go on bike rides. He worked hard and paid attention to his lifestyle, but he was able to do all of the things that brought him the greatest amount of joy and value in his life. Man number two also learned of his diagnosis in his middle age. He was frustrated with the diagnosis, but he did make some changes. However, unfortunately, he did let some things slide and continue to snack on high sugar foods and eat in a somewhat less controlled fashion. He did not make all of the changes necessary to live an optimal life with this diagnosis. While man number one was living the life he had idealized for himself in fulfillment with himself and his family, man number two is beginning to have difficulty with the poor blood circulation problem that's common with diabetes. Shortly afterwards, he had a heart attack, which he was able to eventually recover from. However, after experiencing other circulation concerns in the very tiny veins of his legs, the circulation became so poor that doctors determined that his foot needed to be amputated. About 2 years later, an amputation was required higher up on this leg, so more of this leg had to be cut off. At this point, he could not stand on his own, and he could not drive anywhere on his own. He had to have his wife take him everywhere. He had to spend hours each week getting ready for, driving to, and having doctor's appointments. Other than these short ventures out of the house, he was relegated to watching television on his couch. Later on that year, he had problems in his other leg, which required its own amputation. He lived for a few years longer, but he was homebound during this time, and he was not able to have many quote-unquote life experiences. And if he wanted to see a friend, the person had to come over to his house. It was certainly a poor quality of life. Man 1 and Man 2 were friends. As Man 2's condition declined, he watched Man 1 live out a life that he was no longer able to have, even though he was younger than Man 1. And he had to live with the realization that if he had made the necessary changes years ago, he too would be able to live out this better, full, and complete life. Alright, so in order to really understand the benefits of nutrition, it's important to know what goes on when nutrition does not go right and when we eat the wrong types of foods. Part 1 of 2 of bad nutrition is going to focus on inflammation, and we're going to briefly touch on this. But inflammation in general is the body's way of healing itself. It is what is going to occur when we fall and bump our knee, and we have swelling and redness in the knee. That's inflammation. That's the body trying to heal itself, heal that area. It's also going to occur more negatively from other types of environmental factors and from bad nutrition. So we can get inflammation inside of us that's going to occur from pollution, smoking, ultraviolet light, and radiation. From a nutrition standpoint, we generally get this through processed foods. And by processed foods, we're talking about the obvious bad processed foods. This is meats like hot dogs, lunch meat, Spam, foods that have nitrates in them. And this is also going to occur from processed sugars and refined grains. This includes things like sodas, candies, dessert type foods, in general sweets. So inflammation, it manifests itself through free radicals and oxidative stress, but really all those terms mean the same thing. We're talking about inflammation. And in a couple slides, we'll talk about how inflammation has a negative health effect. The second part of bad nutrition is related to incorrect or excess carbohydrate intake. We're not going to go into the details on that, but what that is going to cause is an unoptimal release and internal balance of hormones, which throws off our mood and our feelings and our thoughts. And it's also going to significantly affect, this probably more than anything else, this is going to affect our overall energy levels. Incorrect carbohydrate intake. With the incorrect or excess carbohydrate intake, what we're going to run into is increased feelings of stress and also inconsistent energy levels. So we're going to have more energy lows with high carbohydrate intake. With higher carbohydrate intake and excess sugar intake, do you think that's going to mean that we're also going to have sugar highs? It would make sense to think that, but a sugar high is actually not really a thing. It pretty much just is referring to children that get really excited from seeing and having candy available, not from the actual effect of eating the sugary food. They just get excited about it. They run around. They're happy. That's what people think a blood sugar high is. Now, we do have sugar highs. Our levels of sugar in our body can get to the point where they're too high, but that doesn't have an effect on how we feel. It especially does not cause us to have a ton of energy. All that it really does cause some hormonal imbalances, and after a short period of time, it's going to lead to an energy crash. So bad nutrition, from a very short-term standpoint, it's going to cause inconsistent, specifically low energy levels. It's also going to cause an increased feeling of stress that we have. Then the second part of, or the first part of bad nutrition, the inflammation aspect, that is going to make concentration more difficult, and it also impairs our mood. It makes us a little bit more moody, a little bit more likely to be upset and bothered by things that are going on in day-to-day life. So again, the main effects of nutrition, from inflammation, we're talking impaired mood and loss of concentration. And then from incorrect or excess carbohydrate intake, that's going to cause an increased feeling of stress and also inconsistent energy levels. Thank you for listening to that story. That story is not designed to start off the class on a depressing note. It is to provide a little spark to your day and help you recognize that there is a tremendous value to your life experiences, and that personal nutrition is just one of many avenues that can help to increase the value that you have in your own life. It's obvious that poor nutrition leads to health consequences, but as was the case for me, we generally don't realize how bad these health problems truly are until they directly affect us or someone that we are close to. But these consequences are very bad. Diabetes, if not controlled, can lead to heart attacks, vision problems, and amputation. Kidney disease, if not controlled, can put a person in a state where they must go to a dialysis clinic for 3 to 5 hours a week in order to filter out potential toxins in their blood, since their kidneys are no longer able to do so on their own. It's possible for our bones to become so weak, as is the case with osteoporosis, that a fall that would normally result in a bruise that you'd never think of again after a few minutes can actually turn into a full-blown fracture. There are immediate consequences to poor nutrition. These include stress, fatigue, depression, decreased function, and ultimately decreased quality of life. Long-term problems are more so related to chronic diseases such as cancer, blood pressure, osteoporosis, kidney disease, diabetes, heart disease, and a variety of other conditions. We talked about all of the bad effects of bad nutrition, but it's important to look at the other side of things too, because when we're trying to make some type of behavioral change, we want to see a positive outcome. We're more likely to make long-term positive behavioral change if we can see something beneficial that occurs as opposed to just avoiding something bad. We tend to not stick with things over a long period of time if we're just doing it to avoid consequences. So what does good nutrition give us? We're going to get more consistent, higher levels of energy. From a mental standpoint, we have clearer thinking and improved mood and feelings. If we are involved in exercise, we're going to have more energy and more consistent energy for that exercise. It will also allow increased rates of recovery following exercise, and then being able to implement good nutrition practices into our day-to-day life. It gives us a little bit more power and control over things that are going on with us, and it improves our ability to take control of our own lives and have a little bit more autonomy over things that are going on with us. This is the not quite so fun of the course, but the part of the course that we still need to go over and clarify before we get started. And it's very important that you understand this, because if you're able to follow these basic guidelines and aware of certain deadlines, it's going to make learning about nutrition much, much simpler and much easier. The first piece is that if you cannot take an exam on a certain day, you are going to have to notify myself at least 24 hours before the exam date. If you do not notify me before this time, then you will not be eligible to retake that quiz or exam for full credit. Also, number 2, submission of assignments. It's very important that assignments are submitted on time. You can submit them late, but if you do so, that is going to result in a 10% deduction if it's within 24 hours after a due date. If it's 1 minute after when an assignment is due, there's going to be a 10% deduction from what you get for that grade. You can submit a late assignment up to 1 week after it's due. However, this is going to result in a 25% deduction of the point total that you receive from that assignment. Very important now, very important. After 1 week post the due date of an assignment cannot be submitted for any credit whatsoever. So please stay on top of this class and the assignment due dates. Get your assignments in on time. Be aware of the exams, take them on time, and things will go by a lot more smoothly. If you need special accommodations for an exam or for an assignment, email me at least 24 hours before the due date and we can work something out. Now also, there will be some changes to this course. most likely. So please check D2L regularly, at least once a week, if not twice or 3 times. I won't post anything that is not for something that's going to occur more than a week out, but still, stay in touch, be aware, and again, email me if you have any questions that I can help to clarify. Before we get into the interesting stuff for this class, we have to understand very basic definitions related to our class. First and foremost is nutrition. And nutrition is a science that studies the interactions between living organisms and food. So what this means is that we're looking at the effect that food has on living organisms. So what role do nutrients play in our body? And then what nutrients and what foods do we need to get to make sure that we get those necessary nutrients? Number 2, a kilocalorie is a unit of measure that's used to express the amount of energy provided by food. When you hear someone talk about calories, what they actually probably mean is kilocalories. If they were saying that this soda has 120 calories, they would be drinking a lot of soda. That would be 120,000 kilocalories of soda, which would be liters upon liters upon liters upon liters of some type of regular soda that you would need to get that amount. But when people say calories, what they usually mean is kilocalories, and that's what we'll be referring to in this class. And kilocalories, they provide energy. So they allow our body to perform certain functions. So calories, kilocalories, that's energy. And then number 3 is essential nutrients. We get nutrients from food. Nutrients are a part of nutrition. What it is that makes them essential is that we need to get certain nutrients. So there are things from food that we can get, but they might not actually have any effect on our health, so they would be non-essential. Essential nutrients we need to get in order to survive. So protein, carbohydrates, fats, vitamin A, vitamin C, vitamin D, those all have essential roles on our health. Therefore, those nutrients are essential. And in this class, we'll probably be referring to the term essential more and more as we go throughout the material. Know that essential means that we need to get it. It's essential that we get those nutrients. One of my favorite concepts is nutrient density, and what that basically means is how much bang for our buck can we get from a certain food. So how many nutrients can we get in a food? Foods that are nutrient dense, these tend to be vegetables, fruits, whole grains, beans, legumes. They're foods that don't necessarily have a lot of calories, but in the amount of space that they have, they pack in a ton of nutrients. Let's take a look at milk versus iced tea to get a better idea of what nutrient density is. So with the iced tea, and you could say the same for like a soda, the iced tea you get about 110 total calories from an 8-ounce serving. Let's see what kind of vitamins and minerals you get from that sweet and iced tea. Well, not many. You're pretty much just getting calories in the form of sugar or carbohydrates. Now for low-fat milk, you're getting about the same amount of calories, actually a few less calories than you are with the iced tea. However, look what else you're getting with that low-fat milk. You're getting calcium, you're getting vitamin D, you're getting vitamin A, you're getting phosphorus, magnesium, other vitamins and minerals. You're not just getting carbohydrates. Also not noted on here is that you're getting protein with that as well. So it's a more balanced food, and it's a more nutrient-rich or nutrient-dense food. Foods that are not nutrient-dense that could be healthy are fatty meats, oils, as long as they're the right ones, have a lot of calories, but maybe not as many nutrients. Nutrient density is about getting as many nutrients that are essential for our health into as little food as possible, or as much food as possible. More food more nutrients, greater nutrient density. There are two types of ways to have poor nutrition. One is through malnutrition and one is through overnutrition. Malnutrition is the underconsumption or a deficiency of either calories or nutrients, as is common in the case of somebody facing starvation. It can also be somebody who is well fed in terms of getting enough calories, proteins, and fats. They may be at an optimal weight and they may appear physically healthy, but they may be not getting one of the necessary micronutrients, which is the vitamins or minerals, and still have a nutrient deficiency or still have malnutrition. The other side of poor nutrition is overnutrition, and this manifests itself through overweight and obese status. For nutrients, there are 6 main groups of nutrients. We have vitamins, minerals, carbohydrates, protein, fat, and water. Now, the main 2 groups of these 6 classes of nutrients are the micronutrients number 1 and the macronutrients number 2. Think about those 2 terms. The difference is micro versus macro. Micro means small, macro means big. And so what that means for nutrition is that macronutrients, these are needed in larger quantities. We need more of these for our bodies to function optimally. For the micronutrients, we need these in smaller quantities. Larger quantities are not necessary for optimal function to occur. So what we have is the carbohydrates, fats, proteins, and water, which are the macros, which we need in large amounts. And again, the micros, which are the vitamins and the minerals. Now, if you were to take a look at a food label of some food that you're eating, and you look at the nutrition facts, what you'll see is that carbohydrates, fats, and protein, the macronutrients, those amounts are listed in grams. For micronutrients, those amounts are often listed in milligrams. And to actually see that, take a look at potassium and then take a look at sodium. And if you have a minute, go ahead and do it right now just to get a better understanding of what it is that we're talking about in terms of micro versus macro, needing smaller versus larger amounts in our body. One more note about macronutrients is that they actually provide energy. And energy is another word for calories. Micronutrients do not provide energy, but they might play a role in energy metabolism, meaning that for the energy to be metabolized, we need to have one vitamin or mineral thrown into our metabolic system in order to get that metabolic system active, breaking down, processing, and allowing our body to use the carbohydrates, fats, or proteins. What is it that nutrients actually do for us? Well, they help to regulate our body temperature. If we have enough dietary fat, then we have insulation for our organs. It keeps us relatively warm in colder months. If we get enough fluid and water, our body temperature, because it's so directly related to our fluid status, it's able to self-regulate and warm itself up and cool itself down appropriately, or stay at a stable temperature. If we're dehydrated, our internal temperature is a lot more likely to fluctuate. Nutrients, they provide energy for all essential body functions. This could be going for a walk, going for a run, lifting weights. They help to regulate various body processes. There's a lot of B vitamins that play roles in metabolism. Iron, a mineral that helps to transport oxygen throughout the body. Calcium, that adds structure to our bones and contribute to body structure. Calcium, phosphorus, and magnesium, they all contribute to our bones. And then protein contributes to our muscles. So again, remember, we have the 2 different classes of the nutrients. We have the macronutrients and we have the micronutrients. The macronutrients provide energy, and they're needed in larger quantities, and they include carbohydrates, fats, proteins, and technically they also include water. because we need water in large quantities. But the first one is carbohydrates. And there's a lot of confusion around carbohydrates. But carbohydrates are always, in their most basic form, sugars. Now you'll see that there's sugars and starches listed on this page. Now, what you should know about starches is that when they're broken down into their most elemental form, they're sugars. But they don't look sugary. The way that it works is that they have many sugar molecules that are connected to one another, and they form very long strands that are starchy strands, which have a different taste, but still, again, are just long links of sugar foods. And when we eat the starchy foods, break them down, what happens is they're digested into the sugars, or the very simple carbohydrates. The sugary foods that we eat, which can include fruits and they can include sweets, these foods are broken down relatively quicker for the most part in our bodies, but they're already in their basic elemental form. They might have two sugar molecules connected to one another, but they're much more basic. They're spread apart. They're individual. Now, carbohydrates get a really bad rap, and that with good reason. In the United States, we eat a lot of carbs, and we have a lot of chronic diseases, especially diseases related to high blood sugar. There might be a link between these two, between the carbohydrates and the high blood sugar, and there absolutely is. But the link is mostly related to getting the bad sources of carbohydrates. The bad sources of carbohydrates for the starches are white refined grains and processed vegetables such as French fries or hash browns. For sugars in the processed form are really bad because we're getting things like cookies, cakes, Jell-O, ice cream. They have a lot of calories and a lot of very rapidly digesting, very high blood sugar contributing ingredients in them, but they don't have any other vitamins and minerals, or if they do, they have very, very low amounts of them. You can look on a lot of white bread, well, on pretty much all white breads in the United States and any other refined grains in the United States, and you'll see that they have a lot of other vitamins and minerals. However, they're still not as processed. They're still not processed as well as whole grains, whole wheat bread, beans, other starchy vegetables that are not super processed, like sweet potatoes of all varieties, including white potatoes, as long as they're not super processed, beans, peas, all good sources of starchy carbohydrates. For the sugars, you can have healthy sugars, but that generally is just going to come from fruit. Main point to understand, to tie this back in with nutrient density, is that the good sugars, the fruits, and the good starches, the starchy vegetables, and the whole grains, those are very nutrient dense foods. Group number 2 is lipids, or fats. They provide our body with energy that's actually a little bit different than what we get from carbohydrates, but we'll go over that as we get further along in this class. They help to carry fat-soluble vitamins and allow our body to use fat-soluble vitamins. They supply essential fatty acids that our body uses to help fight off inflammation. They provide protection to our organs and to our bones. They provide insulation to our internal organs so that we're able to stay warmer and they're safer during colder times. And they also help to promote satiety. And some of the better fats include avocados, nuts, seeds, olive oil, and fatty fish. Protein is known primarily for its role in muscle and body structure, but it also helps to regulate body processes. Proteins comprise the structure for enzymes, which are catalysts, meaning that they allow for chemical reactions to occur. They are also the structural components of antibodies, and they will help us to feel full, so they provide satiety. Two different types of protein foods that we get are meat-based and vegetarian-based. Meat-based foods include meat, dairy, fish, and eggs. Vegetarian proteins are sources that do not come from meat in any way. We get plant proteins from whole grains, nuts, seeds, beans, and from vegetables. It tends to be easier to get all of our protein from meat sources than it is from plant sources because protein is very concentrated in meat. If following a vegetarian or a more restrictive vegan diet, there is usually a little bit more planning and effort required to ensure that we can get all of the protein we need. But it certainly is doable either way. Water is a macronutrient as well, but it's a little bit different than carbohydrates, fats, and proteins because although it's needed in large quantities, making it a macronutrient, it does not provide energy like the other macronutrients do. Some of the roles of water are that it helps to transport nutrients throughout our body, it helps to aid in digestion and move the digestive process along. It serves as a medium for chemical reactions, so chemical reactions can occur in our body. As it moves things along our digestive tract, it also helps to remove wastes. It lubricates the joints. Dehydration can actually cause joint pain, believe it or not. And a deficiency or dehydration can occur very quickly, probably quicker than any other nutrient deficiency can. And nutrient deficiencies of water are very severe. It only requires a 2% loss from fluid loss to actually indicate dehydration. A further loss can result in very significant health consequences, including body shutdown and death. It's easy to lose 2% of weight from water when you consider that approximately 60% of our body weight is comprised of water. One question we often run into is, what should we eat? Now, there are a couple models that we can use as a very simple guide for healthy eating. One's provided by the United States Department of Agriculture. The one on the right is the refined version by Harvard. Notice the emphasis placed on balance between the various food groups. Emphasize vegetables the most and consume the rest in moderation, but do get a little bit of each. This ensures that you get adequate calories, protein, and fats, along with all the essential vitamins, minerals, and phytonutrients. Also, this allows for consistent energy throughout the day. When choosing a healthy diet, you need to think about variety, balance, and moderation. We need to eat a variety of foods because no single food can provide all of the nutrients that our body needs. We need to balance our calories coming in and going out, as well as get a balance in the nutrients that we need. Finally, we need to practice moderation, or we need to consume the foods that we like, but not have too much of them. All right, so you have a quick concept check. These are not due as an assignment, but it will help you to understand this material, and you'll probably do better on the test if you take a couple minutes to just jot down answers to these questions. First one is, what are the macronutrients and what are the micronutrients? You don't have to provide all the individual ones, just the main nutrient classes. And number two, what are the three main functions of nutrients? The final topic that we're going to go over for this first chapter is evaluating nutrition information. And it's essential to understand the difference between speculation and science because there's a lot of information that's out there. On the bottom right corner of the screen, you'll notice what's titled as the vicious diet cycle. This is a common occurrence for fad diets or diets based to some degree on pseudoscience. So what typically happens is people will go on this diet. They have what's known as a stress or famine response. And what happens is, just like it sounds like, there's a lot of stress that's created, a lot of chemicals are released into the body that is basically the body telling that, hey, this is not appropriate for what we're designed to do. What you'll see 90–95% of the time that people go on these fad diets is that they'll follow it for a bit, they'll lose some weight, they'll fall off. When they fall off, what happens is they overcompensate. Generally, during the famine response, they lose protein or muscle. And so when they regain the weight, they tend to regain extra fat. And oftentimes, because it's very challenging to go through something like this, they gain more weight than when they started. Nutrition research can seem long, boring, and complicated, but overall it's pretty reliable. There are two main components of legitimate nutrition research that you need to be aware of: peer review and scientific method. All legitimate research, nutrition-based, focuses on these two concepts. Scientific method provides an outline for what steps to go through when conducting the research. There has to be a purpose. There must be actual research done about the topic. That includes research on other research that's been done. So you're looking at other research studies. From that, you're formulating an hypothesis, what you expect for your test to be able to determine. You do some type of experiment or test. You analyze this data, and then you provide a conclusion, which basically is your thoughts and just an overview of everything that's been done. And number two, and this is crucial, is the peer review process. And this ensures accuracy and reliability. Research professionals not involved in the study are going to review the entire research write-up that's submitted for publication. Only if approved by professional peers does research become published and legitimatized. And this is the research that you will find in scientific journals. Unfortunately, nutrition research is not perfect and it can be wrong. Take, for example, dietary cholesterol and saturated fat. The old data said to avoid cholesterol, avoid saturated fat, and the most recent research says saturated fat and cholesterol actually is not that bad for you. Just get unprocessed versions of fat and avoid the processed versions. And doing that will actually allow you to have good, healthy cholesterol levels and good and healthy blood triglyceride or fat levels. This slide may look familiar, and that's because we went over this about 10 slides into this lecture. Class rules and expectations are extremely important for you to understand to do well in this course. Again, make sure that you're submitting your assignments on time and that you're aware of assignment dates and exam dates. If you cannot make an assignment due date, or if you are going to be unable to take an exam on a certain date, email myself as soon as possible, at least 24 hours before the exam, but preferably sooner, so that we can set up something that's going to work well with the course schedule. Again, if anything is submitted 1 week after its due date, it's eligible for 0 credit. So again, please be aware of due dates, please be aware of exam dates, and communicate with myself as much as you need to.
That's everything for this set of slides for week 1. For the rest of this week, we're going to talk about dietary guidelines, so things like MyPlate, dietary reference intakes, acceptable macronutrient distribution ranges, and then from there, we're going to go on to digestion, absorption, and processing of nutrients.